Stop for a second. Before you scroll, before you distract yourself, before this year slips away like all the others. What if 2026 doesn't change? But you do? Most people don't fail because they lack talent. They fail because they repeat the same thoughts, the same habits, the same excuses, every single year. The truth is simple but uncomfortable. Your life will not change unless your mindset changes. And mindset doesn't change overnight. It changes quietly, daily, habit by habit. Today I'm going to walk you through 10 powerful habits. Not theories, not hype, but real mental shifts that can reset how you think, act, and live in 2026. If you apply even a few of these, you won't recognize yourself 1 year from now. Let's begin. The first habit begins before your day even starts. Not after you've had coffee. Not after you've checked messages. Not after the world has already made its demands on you. It begins in that quiet moment, right when your eyes open. Most people don't notice this moment anymore. The alarm rings, the hand reaches out, and the phone is already there. Screen glowing. Notifications waiting. Someone needs something. Something happened. Something is trending. Before your feet touch the floor, your mind is already crowded. Messages from work. News headlines filled with urgency. Other people's opinions. Other people's successes. Other people's problems. And just like that, the day begins, not on your terms but on everyone else's. Before your mind even wakes up, it's already reacting. Reacting to information. Reacting to pressure. Reacting to comparison. This doesn't feel dangerous. Feels normal. But over time, it trains your brain into a very specific pattern. Reaction mode. In reaction mode, you're always catching up. Always responding. Always slightly behind. Your thoughts don't feel calm. They feel rushed. Scattered. Pulled in too many directions at once. You didn't choose how to feel that morning, but somehow you're already stressed. This is how many people live their entire lives. Day after day. Year after year. Not because they're lazy. Not because they don't care. But because they never claimed the first moments of their day. And those moments matter more than most people realize. The first minutes after waking are when your mind is most open. Most impressionable. Most vulnerable. Whatever enters your awareness first sets the tone for everything that follows. If the first thing you consume is chaos, your mind learns chaos. If the first thing you consume is urgency, your mind learns urgency. And slowly, without you noticing, reaction mode becomes your default way of living. You react to problems instead of preparing for them. You react to emotions instead of understanding them. You react to life instead of directing it. This is why so many days feel exhausting before they even begin. Now imagine something different. It's morning. Your alarm rings. You open your eyes. And for once, you don't reach for your phone. It's still there. Nothing bad will happen if you ignore it for a few minutes. You sit up slowly. You feel the weight of your body. The quiet of the room. Maybe the light through the window is soft. Maybe it's still dark outside. Either way, there is no noise yet. No demands. No rush. Just you. In 2026, try this instead. Give yourself 10 quiet minutes. No phone. No noise. No input. At first, it might feel uncomfortable. Your mind might reach for stimulation automatically. You might feel the urge to check just quickly. Just in case. That urge is a habit. And habits don't disappear quietly. So instead you sit. You breathe. Not in a special way. Not trying to meditate perfectly. Just breathing. You stretch a little. Roll your shoulders. Feel your muscles wake up. Or maybe you don't do anything at all. Maybe you just sit on the edge of the bed and stare out the window. Watch the sky. Watch the light change. Notice the stillness. These moments seem small. Almost insignificant. But something powerful is happening beneath the surface. Your mind is waking up without being attacked. There are no notifications telling you what matters. No headlines telling you what to fear. No comparisons telling you who you should be. For the first time in the day, your thoughts belong to you. And in that space, you begin to feel something you might not have felt in a long time. Calm. Not excitement. Not motivation. Calm. Your nervous system settles. Your breathing slows. Your thoughts stop racing. You are no longer reacting. You are present. This habit teaches your mind one powerful lesson. You come first. Not in a selfish way. In a grounded way. You are not here only to respond to the world. You are allowed to arrive into your own life before the noise begins. When your mind learns this lesson, it carries it forward. Into conversations. Into decisions. Into stressful moments later in the day. Because when pressure shows up, and it will, you've already reminded yourself that you are not powerless. You You started the day on your terms. And something else happens too. You begin to notice your own thoughts more clearly. Thoughts that were always there, but buried under noise. Ideas, worries, small insights. Sometimes it's uncomfortable. Sometimes you realize you've been avoiding certain feelings. But awareness is not the enemy. Avoidance is. Those quiet minutes become a mirror. Not a judgment, but a reflection. You start to understand what kind of day you actually need. Not what the world expects. Not what your phone demands. But what you need. Some days that means slowing down. Some days it means focusing deeply. Some days it means being gentle with yourself. And because you listened in the morning, you move through the day with more intention. When you control the first moments of your day, you start controlling the rest of it. Not perfectly. Not completely. But enough. Enough to pause before reacting. Enough to choose your response. Enough to stay grounded when things don't go as planned. This habit doesn't make your life easy. It makes you centered. And centered people handle difficulty differently. They don't panic as quickly. They don't spiral as easily. They don't feel lost at the first sign of stress. Because they know how to return to themselves. All from 10 quiet minutes. In a world that constantly demands your attention, choosing silence is an act of strength. In a culture that glorifies busyness, choosing stillness is an act of control. And in a year like 2026, where distractions will only increase, this habit becomes a foundation. Not a luxury. A necessity. You won't always get it right. Some mornings you'll grab your phone without thinking. That's okay. This habit isn't about perfection. It's about practice. Every time you choose quiet over noise, you reinforce a new identity. Someone who leads their day, instead of being dragged through it. And slowly, quietly, habit by habit, your mindset begins to change. Not because life became easier, but because you became steadier. And that changes everything. Confidence is built quietly. Confidence is not built by big wins. Not by applause. Not by sudden success. Not by one dramatic moment where everything finally clicks. Confidence is built quietly. In moments no one sees, in decisions that feel small, almost boring. In promises you make to yourself when no one else is watching. Most people don't realize this. They think confidence arrives after success. After the promotion. After the weight loss. After the recognition. They wait for life to prove them worthy. But real confidence doesn't come from life. It comes from you. And it starts with something simple. Something most people overlook. Keeping small promises. The promises we whisper to ourselves. I'll wake up earlier. You say it at night, lying in bed, scrolling through your phone. You imagine the morning version of yourself. Focused, calm, ahead of the day. Feels good to believe it. I'll walk for 10 minutes. You tell yourself this after a long day when your body feels heavy and your mind feels tired. 10 minutes sounds easy. Almost too easy. I'll read 1 page. Just 1. Not a chapter. Not a book. 1 page before sleep. These promises don't feel dramatic. They don't feel life-changing in the moment. They feel harmless. But they are not harmless. Because every promise you make to yourself carries weight. Even the smallest ones. Especially the smallest ones. How trust slowly breaks. Most people don't fail because they aim too high. They fail because they promise too much and keep too little. The alarm rings. You hit snooze. Just 5 more minutes. The walk gets skipped. I'll do it tomorrow. The book stays closed. Today was too busy. Nothing explodes. Nothing dramatic happens. Life goes on. But something quiet breaks. Trust. Not trust in the world. Not trust in other people. Trust in yourself. Your brain starts keeping score even if you're not aware of it. Every broken promise sends a message. You don't follow through. You say things you don't mean. You can't be relied on. And over time that message becomes a belief. You stop believing your own words. You stop taking your own plans seriously. You stop trusting the voice in your head. That's where self-doubt grows. Not from failure, but from inconsistency. Why motivation fades so fast? People often say, I just lack motivation. But motivation isn't the real problem. The real problem is trust. When you don't trust yourself, motivation has nowhere to land. Why would your brain get excited about a goal it doesn't believe you'll finish? So it protects you. It lowers energy. It creates excuses. Keeps you comfortable. Not because you're weak, but because your mind learned, slowly, that effort leads to disappointment. This is why motivation feels temporary for so many people. It shows up strong, and disappears just as fast. Because motivation follows belief. And belief follows proof. The shift that changes everything. This is where 2026 becomes different. Not louder. Not harder. Just more honest. Your mindset reset doesn't start with ambition. It starts with restraint. Only promise what you can keep. That's it. No dramatic overhaul. No perfect routine. No overnight transformation. Just fewer promises. Smaller promises. Real promises. Promises that feel almost too easy. And then, keep them. The power of keeping one small promise. Imagine waking up 5 minutes earlier. Not an hour. Just 5 minutes. You do it. No celebration. No post about it. But your brain notices. I said I would, and I did. You walk for 10 minutes. Even when you don't feel like it. Even when it feels pointless. Your brain notices again. I can be trusted. You read one page. Some nights it feels meaningless. Some nights you want to skip. But you don't. And slowly something changes. Not in your body. Not in your life. In your identity. The message you're sending your brain. Every kept promise sends a signal. I am reliable. I do what I say. My words matter. That message doesn't come from thinking. It comes from evidence. Your brain doesn't care about intentions. It cares about patterns. And when the pattern changes, the story changes. You stop seeing yourself as someone who tries. You start seeing yourself as someone who follows through. That's confidence. Not loud. Not flashy. Quiet. Stable. Why discipline becomes easier. Here's the part most people miss. Discipline doesn't come from force. It comes from trust. When you trust yourself, discipline feels natural. You don't argue with yourself as much. You don't negotiate every decision. You just act. Because you believe your effort will mean something. That belief makes discipline lighter. Less exhausting. Less emotional. You're no longer dragging yourself forward. You're walking with yourself. How self-doubt gets quieter. Self-doubt doesn't disappear overnight. It doesn't vanish completely. But it gets quieter. Its voice loses authority. Because now when doubt says, you won't stick to this, your experience answers back. I already have. And doubt has nothing to argue with. Confidence isn't the absence of doubt. It's the presence of evidence. This is how identity changes. You don't become confident by declaring it. You become confident by proving it, to yourself. One small promise at a time. Not when it's convenient. Not when you feel inspired. But especially when you don't. That's where identity shifts. From someone who hopes, to someone who knows. A quiet promise to yourself. So as 2026 approaches, don't ask, how do I change my life? Ask this instead. What is one promise I can keep today? Not tomorrow. Not next week. Today. Make it small enough that failure feels almost impossible. Make it honest. Make it real. Then keep it. And do it again tomorrow. Because confidence is earned. Not through big wins. Not through motivation. Not through perfection. But through trust. Trust built quietly. Daily. Patiently. One kept promise at a time. And one day, without realizing when it happened, you'll look back and feel it. That calm certainty. That steady belief. Not because life proved you capable. But because you did. The voice that never leaves. There's a voice that follows you everywhere. It's there when you wake up, before your eyes are fully open. It's there when you look in the mirror. It's there when you make a mistake. It's there when you're quiet. And it's especially loud when no one else is around. Your inner voice. Most people don't notice it at first. Feels normal. Familiar. Almost invisible. Like background noise you've heard for so long that you stopped questioning it. But once you slow down enough to listen, you realize something uncomfortable. That voice isn't always kind. You might be brushing your teeth, staring at your tired face in the mirror, and without warning, it says something sharp. You're lazy. You're tying your shoes, already running late, and it whispers. You always mess things up. You open your phone, see the time, and before you can even think, it hits you again. You're too late. Again. No one else said it. No one else heard it. But it lands anyway. Heavy. Quiet. Personal. And the strange thing is, you don't argue with it. You don't stop to question whether it's true. You don't defend yourself the way you would defend someone you care about. You just accept it. The double standard. Imagine for a moment that a friend came to you after a hard day. They sit down across from you. Their shoulders are slumped. Their voice is tired. They say, I messed up today. I tried, but it didn't go how I planned. Now imagine looking them in the eyes and saying, you're useless. You always fail. Why do you even try? You wouldn't say that. Not in a million years. Even if they made a real mistake. Even if they've messed up before. Even if you were frustrated. You'd probably say something softer. Hey, it happens. You're learning. Tomorrow's another chance. I know you're trying. But when it comes to yourself, the rules change. With yourself, there's no filter. No patience. No grace. The words are sharper, colder, and delivered without mercy. You should be better by now. Why can't you get it together? Everyone else is ahead of you. And slowly, without realizing it, you start believing those words describe who you are, rather than what you're going through. How the habit forms. This habit doesn't appear overnight. It forms quietly over years. Maybe it started when you were young. Someone criticized you harshly and that voice stuck. Maybe you failed once, publicly, and your brain decided that pain was something to avoid at all costs. Maybe you thought being hard on yourself would push you forward. At first, it even feels useful. You think, if I'm strict with myself, I'll improve. If I point out my flaws, I won't repeat them. If I don't let myself relax, I'll get ahead. But something changes over time. The voice stops being a coach and starts becoming a judge. It stops correcting behavior and starts attacking identity. It's no longer, that didn't work. It becomes, you don't work. And your brain listens. The quiet damage. This habit slowly destroys your mindset. Not dramatically. Not all at once. It happens in small moments. You hesitate before starting something new because the voice says, you'll fail anyway. You procrastinate because the pressure feels unbearable. You avoid opportunities because being judged by others feels safer than being judged by yourself. Over time, your confidence doesn't collapse. It erodes. Like water dripping on stone. Slow. Consistent. Invisible. You start playing smaller. You stop trusting your instincts. You second-guess decisions you used to make easily. Even your wins feel temporary, like accidents rather than proof of growth. And the worst part? You think this is just how you are. You think everyone feels this way. The wake-up moment. One day, maybe in the middle of a quiet night, something shifts. You're lying in bed, staring at the ceiling. The day didn't go as planned. Again. Your mind replays everything you could have done differently. And there it is. That voice. You failed again. But this time, instead of letting it pass, you pause. You ask a simple question. Would I say this to someone I love? And the answer is immediate. No. That moment doesn't fix everything. But it opens a door. A small one. Just enough to let awareness in. You realize the problem isn't that you're failing too much. The problem is how you talk to yourself when you do. A different approach for 2026. In 2026, something changes. Not because your life suddenly becomes perfect. Not because you stop making mistakes. Not because you magically become confident. But because you decide to change the tone of your inner voice. Not by lying to yourself. Not by pretending everything is fine. But by being firm and kind at the same time. This isn't about fake positivity. It's not about saying, everything is amazing, when it's clearly not. Your brain doesn't believe lies. But it does respond to honesty delivered with respect. So instead of saying, I'm useless, you pause. You breathe. And you say, I'm learning. You don't deny the struggle. You don't ignore the mistake. You simply refuse to turn it into a personal attack. The power of small rephrases. Instead of, I failed again, you say, I'm not done yet. That single shift changes everything. Failure stops being an ending and becomes a moment in the middle of the story. Something temporary. Something workable. When you say, I'm not done yet, your brain hears possibility. It hears movement. It hears permission to keep going. Instead of, I'm too late, you say, I'm still here. Instead of, I can't do this, you say, this is hard and I'm trying. These aren't motivational quotes. They're mental posture adjustments. Small, realistic, grounded shifts that stop the damage before it spreads. What your brain really hears. Your brain listens to you more than anyone else. More than critics. More than compliments. More than advice. Because your voice is constant. When you repeat harsh words, your brain treats them as facts. It builds beliefs around them. It shapes behavior to match them. But when you choose words that support growth, even quietly, your brain adjusts. It becomes safer to try. Safer to fail. Safer to learn. Discipline becomes less about punishment and more about care. Motivation lasts longer because it's not fueled by fear. Self-doubt doesn't disappear, but it gets quieter. Practicing a kinder strength. At first, this feels uncomfortable. Almost wrong. You might think, am I being too easy on myself? Will I lose my edge? But kindness doesn't make you weak. It makes you sustainable. Being firm and kind means you still hold yourself accountable, but without tearing yourself down in the process. You still say, this matters. You still say, I need to improve. You just stop saying, I'm the problem. The long-term shift. Over time, something subtle but powerful happens. You begin to trust yourself again. Not because you're perfect, but because you know you won't abandon yourself when things get hard. You know that even on bad days your inner voice won't turn cruel. It will stay steady, honest, supportive. And that changes how you show up in the world. You try more. You recover faster. You keep going longer. Fewer distractions. You don't need more motivation. That idea hits you quietly one morning, not like a shout, but like a truth you've been avoiding. You've spent years chasing motivation. You've watched videos late at night, listened to speeches while doing dishes, saved quotes you never looked at again. You told yourself that if you could just feel motivated enough, everything would change. You would wake up early. You would focus. You would finally become the version of yourself you keep imagining. But here you are again, tired, distracted, and wondering why nothing sticks. The room is quiet, but your mind isn't. It never is. Your phone sits nearby, face down like it's pretending not to matter. But you know better. Even when it's silent, it pulls at you. A small itch in the back of your thoughts. What if someone texted? What if something happened? What if you missed something important? You tell yourself you'll check it later. Just not now. But later always comes faster than you expect. You sit down to work or to think or to start something meaningful. Maybe it's a personal goal. Maybe it's something you've been putting off for months. You open your laptop with good intentions. Today will be different, you say. 5 minutes later, you're somewhere else. Not physically, but mentally you're gone. A notification. A headline. A video that turns into another video. You don't even remember choosing it. That's the part that bothers you the most. It's not that you decide to lose focus. It's that it happens automatically. Like your attention has learned to leave without asking permission. And slowly, without you noticing, your days start to feel crowded but empty at the same time. Busy but unfulfilled. You're always doing something, yet rarely finishing what actually matters. That's when the thought lands clearly. You don't need more motivation. You need fewer distractions. Not a total life reset. Not a dramatic detox. Not throwing your phone into the ocean or deleting every app overnight. Just fewer distractions. One app. One habit. One unnecessary routine. Just one. At first it sounds too simple. Almost disappointing. You expect change to feel bigger than this. Harder. More intense. But something about the simplicity makes it harder to ignore. You start paying attention. You notice how often you unlock your phone without thinking. How your thumb moves before your mind does. You notice how certain apps don't even bring you joy anymore, they just fill space. They kill time. They give your brain something easy so it doesn't have to sit with silence. You notice how silence makes you uncomfortable. When things go quiet, your thoughts get louder. Regrets. Doubts. Worries about the future. Questions you don't have answers to yet. Distractions have been protecting you from that. But they've also been stealing something else. Your focus. Your clarity. Your ability to stay with one thought long enough for it to turn into something real. So you pick one thing. Just one. Maybe it's an app you open dozens of times a day without gaining anything from it. Maybe it's endless scrolling at night when your body is tired but your mind refuses to rest. Maybe it's checking messages every few minutes, even when nothing is urgent. You don't delete it forever. You don't swear it off dramatically. You limit it. Intentionally. You decide when it gets your attention, rather than letting it decide for you. At first it feels strange. Almost wrong. Like you're missing something. Your hand reaches for your phone out of habit, and for a moment, there's nothing to replace that action. That empty moment feels awkward. But then something unexpected happens. Space appears. Not physical space but mental space. A few quiet seconds where your mind isn't reacting to anything. A moment where there's no new input, no demand, no noise. Just you and your thoughts sitting together. At first, that space feels uncomfortable. Your brain looks for something to grab onto. It wants stimulation. It wants distraction. It wants to escape. But you stay. You breathe. You let the moment exist without filling it. And slowly something shifts. Your thoughts stop racing so fast. They start to line up instead of colliding. Ideas you've been pushing away begin to surface. Not all at once, not dramatically, but gently. You realize how rarely you've given your mind room to breathe. Clarity doesn't arrive like a lightning bolt. It grows quietly, like light entering a room through a small crack. You start noticing things again. How your body feels when it's not constantly tense. How time stretches when you're focused on one task instead of jumping between 10. How good it feels to finish something, really finish it, without interruption. You sit with a problem longer than usual. Instead of running from it, you stay. You think. You write things down. You let confusion exist without immediately trying to escape it. And that's where clarity lives. Not in chaos. Not in constant stimulation. But in space. Mental space. Days pass and something subtle changes in how you move through them. You're still busy. Life hasn't slowed down magically. Responsibilities still exist. Challenges still show up. But you feel different inside those moments. Less scattered. Less reactive. More present. You notice that when distractions decrease, effort feels lighter. Focus isn't something you have to force as much. It begins to come naturally because your attention isn't being pulled in a dozen directions at once. You begin to trust yourself a little more. Not because you're doing everything perfectly, but because you're finally giving your mind a fair chance to work the way it was meant to. And then it becomes clear. Success isn't about doing more. It never was. In 2026, success won't belong to the busiest people. Not the ones who answer every message instantly. Not the ones who fill every minute of their day with noise. Not the ones who confuse movement with progress. It will belong to the most focused ones. The ones who choose depth over distraction. The ones who protect their attention like something valuable, because it is. The ones who understand that every yes to distraction is a quiet no to something meaningful. You don't need to change everything. Just one thing. One app. One habit. One unnecessary routine. Limit it. Not forever. Just intentionally. And in the space that follows, you'll find what you've been looking for all along. Not more motivation, but clarity. And clarity changes everything. Movement is where the fog begins to lift. There was a time when you believed your mind was the problem. You told yourself you were lazy, unmotivated, weak-willed. You wondered why everything felt heavier than it should. Why simple tasks felt exhausting. Why your thoughts moved slowly, like they were wading through thick water. You sat still for long stretches of the day, on your bed, on a chair, on the edge of your own thoughts, waiting for motivation to arrive. Waiting for clarity. Waiting for that invisible switch to flip. But it never did. Instead, your body stayed tense. Your shoulders slowly crept upward without you noticing. Your jaw stayed tight. Your breathing stayed shallow. And with every hour you stayed still, your thoughts grew louder. Not dramatic thoughts. Not even clear ones. Just heavy thoughts. Dull thoughts. The kind that drain you without making a sound. You tried to think your way out of it. You watched videos. Read quotes. Told yourself tomorrow would be different. But tomorrow kept feeling the same. That's when the quiet truth began to surface. Slowly, almost reluctantly. Your body and your mind were never separate. They were always talking to each other. You just hadn't been listening. The weight you couldn't name. It often started in the morning. You'd wake up already tired, even after sleeping. Your phone would be right there, close enough to grab without effort. Scrolling felt easier than standing. Thinking felt easier than moving. Your body stayed still, but your mind didn't. It replayed worries. Small regrets. Things you hadn't done. Things you felt behind on. You thought the heaviness was mental. Emotional. Something wrong inside your head. But what you didn't realize was how long your body had been asking for movement. Not intense workouts. Not dramatic transformations. Just permission to move. Because when the body stays stuck, the mind follows. Stillness, when it lasts too long, doesn't feel peaceful. It feels trapped. And trapped energy doesn't disappear. It turns into restlessness. Low motivation. A quiet sense of weakness you can't explain. The first small shift. The change didn't come from discipline. It didn't come from a big decision or a new routine. It came from a moment of honesty. One day you noticed how stiff your body felt when you stood up. How your legs felt unfamiliar, like they'd been asleep for too long. How your chest felt tight even though nothing was wrong. You didn't tell yourself to fix your life. You just stood. That was it. You stood up and stretched your arms overhead. It wasn't graceful. Your back cracked a little. Your shoulders resisted. But something shifted. Not dramatically. Not instantly. Just enough to notice. Your breath deepened without effort. Your thoughts slowed just a bit. The fog didn't disappear, but it thinned. That's when the idea landed quietly. What if my mind doesn't need more pressure? What if it needs movement? Movement as a message. You started small. Not because you were aiming low, but because you were finally listening. A short walk around the block. A stretch while waiting for coffee. 10 push-ups on the floor, more messy than strong. Nothing impressive. Nothing worth posting. But something changed afterward. You didn't feel euphoric. You didn't feel fixed. You felt lighter. Not in your body. In your head, your thoughts felt less tangled. The constant mental noise lowered its volume. The heaviness didn't disappear, but it stopped pressing so hard. Movement wasn't solving your problems. It was creating space. And space is where clarity lives. The chemistry you never see. You didn't need to understand brain science to feel the effect. You just noticed that after moving even a little, you felt more like yourself. Your brain chemistry was resetting quietly in the background. Stress hormones lowering. Mood stabilizing. Energy redistributing. But more important than chemistry was the message movement sent. I'm not stuck. I can change my state. I don't have to think my way out of everything. Every step you took reminded your nervous system that you were alive, capable, in motion. Stillness had been teaching your brain that things were heavy. Movement taught it that things could shift. Consistency over perfection. Some days you did more. Some days you barely did anything. And for the first time that was okay. You stopped treating movement like a fitness goal. There was no pressure to improve. No expectation to become disciplined overnight. You weren't chasing a body. You were caring for a mind. A short walk still counted. A stretch still mattered. Even standing up and breathing deeply was enough. Because consistency isn't about intensity. It's about showing up. Even when motivation is low. Especially when motivation is low. Movement became a form of self-respect, not self-punishment. The quiet mental shift. Over time, something subtle happened. Your mindset didn't feel weak anymore. Not strong, but stable. You handled stress better. Your reactions slowed. Your thoughts didn't spiral as quickly. You noticed that on days you moved even slightly, your inner voice was kinder. Not overly positive. Just quieter. Movement gave your emotions somewhere to go. Instead of staying trapped in your chest or looping in your mind, they moved through you. And when emotions move, they don't control you. Reframing movement. By 2026, you stopped asking, did I work out? You started asking, did I move today? That question changed everything. Movement became mental hygiene. Like brushing your teeth or washing your face. Not something you earned. Not something you had to be in the mood for. Just something you did because it helped you think clearly. You stopped waiting to feel motivated. You moved first, and let motivation follow. Because movement doesn't require belief. It only requires action. The body leading the mind. You realize something powerful. When your body moves forward, your mind often follows. Not immediately. Not perfectly. But reliably. On days when thoughts felt heavy, movement lightened them. On days when motivation was low, movement created momentum. On days when you felt stuck, movement reminded you that nothing is permanent. Your body wasn't holding you back. It was waiting for you to listen. Where you stand now, you still have hard days. Still have moments of doubt. Still feel heavy sometimes. But now you know what to do. You don't argue with your thoughts. You don't shame yourself. You move. A walk. A stretch. 10 push-ups. And slowly, quietly, your brain remembers how to breathe again. Your body and mind are not separate. They never were. And when you take care of one, the other begins to heal almost on its own. A stagnant mind becomes a negative mind. It doesn't happen all at once. There's no single moment where you suddenly feel stuck and hopeless. It happens quietly. One day you realize you're not excited anymore. Not curious. Not interested. The things that once inspired you now feel distant. The questions you used to ask no longer come to mind. And slowly your thoughts begin to repeat themselves. Same worries. Same doubts. Same fears. When the mind stops growing, it doesn't stay neutral. It turns inward. And often it turns negative. You begin to overthink. You replay past mistakes. You compare yourself to others. Not because you want to, but because your mind has nowhere else to go. This is how hopelessness begins. Not with failure, but with stagnation. Many people mistake this feeling for laziness or lack of motivation. But it's not that. It's a mind that hasn't been fed. Think about the last time you felt genuinely curious. Not scrolling. Not distracted. Truly curious. The kind of curiosity that makes time disappear. That pulls you forward instead of weighing you down. That feeling didn't come from pressure. It came from learning. And here's the truth most people forget. You don't need to master everything. You don't need to become an expert. You don't need to overhaul your entire life. You just need to stay curious. Curiosity is gentle. It doesn't demand perfection. It doesn't judge how slow you move. It simply asks, what's next? One idea. One page. One lesson. That's all it takes. But modern life teaches us the opposite. It tells us that learning must be big, intense, impressive. Degrees. Certifications. Achievements. So when people feel tired or overwhelmed, they stop learning altogether. And that's when the mind begins to shrink. Days blur together. Weeks pass unnoticed. Life feels repetitive. You wake up, do what you have to do, and go to sleep. And somewhere inside, a quiet voice whispers, "Is this all there is?" That voice isn't complaining. It's asking for growth. Learning doesn't have to mean textbooks or classrooms. Sometimes, it's a single sentence that shifts your perspective. Sometimes it's a short video that sparks a new idea. Sometimes it's a page in a book that makes you pause and think. Learning reminds your brain of something essential. You are not finished. No matter your age. No matter your past. No matter how stuck you feel right now. Growth is still possible. And when your brain sees evidence of growth, even small evidence, it reacts. Hope returns. Because hopelessness doesn't come from difficulty. It comes from feeling like nothing is changing. Learning proves that change is happening. Quietly. Gradually. But surely. Think about it. When you learn something new, even something small, your mind opens. New connections form. New possibilities appear. You stop feeling trapped in the same mental room. Instead, a door opens. And another. And another. This is why learning is so powerful. It expands your internal world. Even if your external circumstances stay the same, your inner world grows. And when the inner world grows, the outer world eventually follows. But there's another reason people avoid learning. Comfort. Comfort tells you to stay where you are. To repeat what you already know. To avoid effort. Comfort feels safe, but it's deceptive. Because comfort without growth slowly becomes boredom. And boredom slowly becomes frustration. In 2026, choose progress over comfort. Not dramatic progress. Not exhausting progress. Small progress. The kind that feels almost too easy to matter. One page before bed. One concept on your commute. One question asked instead of ignored. That's it. You don't need hours. You don't need motivation. You need intention. Learning doesn't demand that you change who you are. It invites you to become more. And the best part? You don't have to feel confident to learn. You don't have to feel smart. You don't even have to feel interested at first. Curiosity often comes after you begin. You start reading and something clicks. You listen and a sentence stays with you. You learn and your mind wakes up. That awakening feels subtle, but it's powerful. It's the feeling of movement after being still for too long. And slowly the negative thoughts lose their grip. Not because life got easier, but because your mind got stronger. A growing mind doesn't dwell as much on fear. It doesn't replay the same worries endlessly. It looks forward. Even if it doesn't know exactly where it's going. Learning gives your brain evidence that you're moving. And movement kills hopelessness. Hopelessness thrives on the belief that nothing will change. Learning challenges that belief every single day. You start to see patterns. You start to understand yourself better. You start to realize that many of your limits were learned and can be unlearned. This doesn't mean learning will always feel good. Sometimes it's uncomfortable. Sometimes it challenges what you believe. Sometimes it reminds you how much you don't know. But that discomfort is not a sign to stop. It's a sign that growth is happening. In 2026, don't aim to impress anyone. Don't aim to know everything. Aim to stay curious, because curiosity keeps your mind alive. Curiosity keeps your thoughts flexible. Curiosity keeps hope breathing. And one day you'll look back and realize something quietly changed. Your conversations feel different. Your confidence feels steadier. Your outlook feels wider. Not because you transformed overnight, but because you chose again and again to grow instead of stay comfortable. A stagnant mind becomes a negative mind, but a curious mind becomes a hopeful one. And hope, real hope, is built one lesson at a time. The noise we live inside. Noise keeps you distracted from yourself. Not just the sound kind. Not just traffic or voices or music playing in the background. It's the noise of constant input. The endless stream of opinions. The notifications lighting up your screen. The feeling that something is always happening somewhere else, and you should be paying attention to it. From the moment you wake up, the noise is already waiting. Your phone buzzes. Your mind starts racing. Text, messages, news, other people's lives. Before you even fully wake up, your attention is gone. And you don't notice it happening. Because noise feels normal now. How we learn to avoid ourselves. Most people think silence is empty. They think it means boredom, awkwardness, wasted time. So they avoid it. They turn on music while brushing their teeth. They scroll while eating. They keep videos playing while falling asleep. Not because they need it, but because silence feels exposed. Silence removes distractions. And without distractions, there's nowhere to hide. That's when thoughts surface. Feelings you've been pushing down. Questions you've been avoiding. So you fill the space again. More noise. More scrolling. More background sound. Anything but stillness. What noise actually does. Noise keeps you busy, but not fulfilled. Occupied, but not clear. It pulls your attention outward. Toward everything except what's happening inside you. And over time, something subtle happens. You stop listening to yourself. You don't notice when you're tired. You don't notice when something feels wrong. You don't notice what you actually want. You react instead of reflect. Consume instead of create. Scroll instead of feel. Life keeps moving, but clarity doesn't keep up. The strange discomfort of silence. Then one day you try something different. 5 minutes. No music. No talking. No scrolling. Just you. At first, it feels uncomfortable. Your body shifts. Your mind looks for something to grab onto. You feel the urge to reach for your phone without even realizing it. Thoughts start popping up randomly. Things you forgot about. Things you didn't plan to think about. It feels messy. Unsettled. And that's normal. Because silence doesn't create chaos. It reveals it. Why silence feels so loud at first. When you remove noise, you don't enter peace immediately. You enter honesty. Your mind has been holding things in. Questions. Doubts. Emotions. Little unfinished thoughts stacked on top of each other. Silence gives them space to speak. That's why it feels overwhelming at first. Not because silence is dangerous, but because you're finally listening. Your mind says things like, I'm tired. I'm confused. I don't know if I'm happy. And instead of escaping, you hear it. For the first time in a while. Staying instead of escaping. Most people quit here. They label silence as not for them. Too uncomfortable. Too distracting. So they go back to noise. But if you stay, if you don't reach for your phone, if you just breathe, something shifts. The noise inside your head starts to slow down. Thoughts stop shouting. They start lining up. You're no longer fighting them. You're observing them. And that's when clarity begins. How clarity appears quietly. Clarity doesn't arrive with fireworks. It doesn't announce itself. It shows up gently. In a realization you didn't force. In an answer that rises instead of being chased. In a feeling settling instead of spiraling. You suddenly understand why something has been bothering you. Or why you've been feeling restless. Or what decision you've been avoiding. Not because you thought harder. But because you finally gave your mind space to think it all. The emotions that settle. Silence doesn't make emotions disappear. It lets them move. When you constantly distract yourself, emotions stay stuck. They linger in the background, unresolved. Silence allows them to surface and pass. Anxiety softens. Tension releases. Sadness becomes clearer, less heavy. Not because life changed, but because you stopped running from what you feel. And when emotions settle, your body follows. Breathing slows. Shoulders drop. Your nervous system calms. You feel more present. More grounded. More real. Listening to what actually matters. In silence, you start hearing things you've been missing. Your intuition. Your limits. Your needs. You notice what drains you and what energizes you. What feels forced and what feels natural. You stop confusing urgency with importance. You stop reacting to everything. Because silence sharpens awareness. And awareness changes decisions. The power of just 5 minutes. 5 minutes doesn't sound like much. But 5 minutes without noise is rare. 5 minutes without input is powerful. It's enough to interrupt autopilot. Enough to reset your attention. Enough to remind you that you exist beyond the noise. You don't need a retreat. You don't need hours of meditation. You need consistency. 5 honest minutes. Every day. Why silence feels like a secret. Silence doesn't sell well. It's not flashy. It doesn't demand attention. That's why most people overlook it. But the people who use it, they notice something different. They think more clearly. They react less emotionally. They feel more in control of their inner world. Silence becomes a place they return to. A reset button. A quiet anchor. It becomes their advantage. In a loud world, stillness is strength. The world isn't getting quieter. It's getting louder. More opinions. More content. More pressure to respond, react, engage. In that kind of world, silence isn't weakness. It's resistance. It's choosing not to let everything in. It's choosing to protect your attention. It's choosing depth over distraction. And that choice changes you. 2026. A different relationship with silence. In 2026, silence will become your secret weapon. Not something you avoid. something you use. You won't fill every gap with noise. You won't fear being alone with your thoughts. You'll create space on purpose. To reflect. To listen. To reset. And slowly, quietly, your inner voice will grow stronger. What changes when you practice silence? You become more intentional. More emotionally steady. Less reactive. You make decisions with clarity instead of impulse. You understand yourself better. You trust your instincts more. Life doesn't get quieter, but your mind does. And that changes everything. A simple practice. So start small. 5 minutes. Sit. Or walk. Or just stare out a window. No music. No talking. No scrolling. Let the discomfort come. Let the thoughts rise. Then let them pass. You don't need to fix anything. You don't need answers immediately. Just listen. Because silence isn't empty. It's full. Full of insight. Full of truth. Full of what matters. And when you make space for it, you stop being distracted from yourself. You finally hear the voice that's been there all along. Quiet. Patient. Waiting. When ready never comes. The biggest mindset lie is this. I'll start when I feel ready. It sounds reasonable. It sounds mature. It sounds like you're being responsible. Like you're saying, I'm going to do it the right way, at the right time, when I'm fully prepared. But if you've lived long enough, you already know the truth. You won't. Not because you're lazy. Not because you don't care. Not because you're incapable. You won't, because ready is a moving target. It shifts every time you get close. You tell yourself, once I have more time. Then you get time, and now it's once I have more energy. Then you get a little energy, and now it's once I stop feeling anxious. Then your anxiety calms down for a day, and now it's once I'm confident. And confidence never shows up first. It never knocks politely and says, hello, I'm here. Now you may begin. Confidence usually shows up after you begin. Motivation shows up after you begin. Clarity shows up after you begin. But waiting feels safer than starting. So you wait. The comfort of waiting. Waiting has a strange comfort to it. When you're waiting, you still get to believe in the perfect version of yourself. The version that wakes up early with no struggle. The version that works out without needing to fight their own mind. The version that focuses deeply without distractions. The version that starts a project and finishes it cleanly, beautifully, impressively. Waiting lets you keep that fantasy alive. Because the moment you start, reality enters the room. The work is messy. You're slower than you thought. You get distracted. You mess up. You doubt yourself. And that hurts. So your brain offers you a deal. Let's just start later. When you're ready. It sounds like kindness. But it's a trap. Because later becomes tomorrow. Tomorrow becomes next week. Next week becomes next month. And one day you look back and realize you've been getting ready for years. Not building. Not moving. Not growing. Just waiting. The real morning, a real you. Picture a normal day. Not the ideal version of your day. The real one. Your alarm goes off and your body feels heavy. Not dramatic heavy, just that dull resistance like your bones are full of sand. Your eyes open and immediately your mind starts its routine. I didn't sleep enough. I should have gone to bed earlier. I'm already behind. You reach for your phone without thinking. A few notifications. A few messages. A few headlines. And before you even sit up, your brain is already reacting. Then comes the thought. The thought you've used 100 times. I'll start later. You'll start the workout later. You'll start the project later. You'll start the habit later. You'll start the new version of your life later. Because right now you don't feel ready. You feel tired. You feel unmotivated. You feel uncertain. You feel like you're not in the mood. So you tell yourself it's fine. I'll do it when I feel better. But the day moves fast. It always does. You get pulled into small tasks, little distractions, a few responsibilities, a few people needing things from you. And then it's afternoon. Then it's evening. Then it's night. And the same thought returns, but now it's heavier. I'll start tomorrow. And you say it like a promise. But deep down, you've said it so many times that it doesn't feel like a promise anymore. It feels like a sentence you repeat to keep guilt quiet. The moment you realize the truth. There's a moment, usually quiet, when you realize something. It might happen while you're brushing your teeth at night. Or while you're staring at the ceiling. Or while you're sitting in your car, parked, not moving, just thinking. You realize, you've been waiting to feel ready for a long time. And it hasn't happened. You've waited for motivation like it's a mood that's supposed to show up first. Like inspiration is supposed to arrive and pull you by the hand. But most days you don't feel inspired. Most days you feel normal. And normal includes tiredness, stress, uncertainty, and doubt. So if you only act when you feel ready, you'll barely act at all. That's when the truth lands. Action creates motivation, not the other way around. The hard part, starting without the feeling. This is the part most people don't want to hear. Do the work tired. Do it unsure. Do it imperfectly. Because the truth is, you're not always going to feel good before you do something good. You might feel messy inside. You might feel distracted. You might feel like your mind is a noisy room. And still start. Not with giant steps. Not with dramatic changes. Not with pressure that makes you freeze. Just start small. Open the laptop. Write the first sentence. Put on the shoes. Step outside. Do one push-up if that's all you have. Read one page. Wash one dish. The goal isn't to impress anyone. The goal is to break the spell of waiting. Why imperfect is the way in. When you start imperfectly, something powerful happens. You stop performing. You stop trying to do it in the most beautiful way possible. You stop waiting to feel like a different person. You become honest. You say, this is me today. This is what I've got. And I'm still showing up. And that's where momentum is born, not in perfection. Momentum doesn't ask you to be ready. Momentum asks you to move. Even a little. Especially a little. Because once you move, your brain starts cooperating. Not because it suddenly loves hard work, but because it starts seeing evidence. Evidence that you're a person who takes action. And the brain loves patterns. It loves identity. When you act, you send a signal. This is who I am. And once your identity shifts, effort becomes easier. Not instantly, but gradually, quietly, realistically. A small scene. The first day you stop waiting. Let's make it real. It's a day in early 2026. You wake up and you don't feel ready. Nothing magical happened overnight. You're still tired. You still have doubts. Your body still wants comfort. Your brain tries to offer the old deal. Start later. But this time you pause. You sit on the edge of the bed. Your feet touch the cold floor. You stare at the wall for a second, almost like you're facing yourself. And you say something simple. Act first. Feel later. Not like a motivational quote. Like a decision. Then you stand up. Not because you feel motivated, because you decided. You drink some water. You splash your face. Your eyes are still heavy. Your mind is still foggy. You put on clothes that are good enough. Then you do the thing. Maybe it's the workout. Maybe it's writing. Maybe it's studying. Maybe it's a job application. Maybe it's cleaning your room. Maybe it's a business task you've been avoiding for weeks. You do it tired. And it doesn't feel amazing at first. It feels awkward. It feels slow. It feels like you're walking through mud. But you keep going. For 5 minutes. For 10 minutes. For one small chunk of effort. And then, something changes. Not dramatically. Not like fireworks. But you notice the smallest shift inside you. Your body warms up. Your mind gets a little clearer. Your resistance drops from a 9 to a 7. And that's when you realize something important. Motivation didn't come first. It came because you started. The after feeling. After you finish, even if it was small, you feel different. Not perfect. Not unstoppable. But lighter. There's a quiet pride that doesn't need attention. Because you did something most people don't do. You didn't wait for a feeling. You acted. And now your brain has proof. Proof that you keep promises even when it's hard. Proof that you can move without being pushed. Proof that you're not controlled by your mood. That proof is powerful. It builds something inside you that doesn't vanish when life gets messy. It builds trust. The old pattern versus the new pattern. The old pattern was, wait, feel ready, act. But ready rarely arrives. So it becomes, wait, feel worse, avoid more. And slowly your world shrinks. The new pattern is, act, feel progress, act again. This doesn't mean you're never tired. It doesn't mean you never struggle. It doesn't mean you become a robot. It means you stop using your feelings as permission. You treat feelings like weather. Sometimes it's sunny. Sometimes it's cloudy. Sometimes it storms. But you don't cancel your life because the sky isn't perfect. You adapt. You adjust. You still move. Doing it tired, unsure, imperfectly. Let's be honest. Some days you'll still feel the pull to wait. You'll hear the inner voice say, not today. You're too tired. Start when things calm down. Start when you have more time. And the truth is, sometimes rest is necessary. But most times that voice isn't asking for rest. It's asking for comfort. And comfort, when it becomes a lifestyle, creates regret. So the new mindset becomes simple. Do the work tired. Do it unsure. Do it imperfectly. Because the real win isn't that you did it perfectly. The real win is that you did it at all. You showed up. Momentum, The real secret. Momentum is not a personality trait. It's not something you're born with. Momentum is built. And it's built in the moments no one claps for. When you start even though you feel behind. When you begin even though you don't know the full plan. When you take the first step without guarantee. Momentum is the reward for action. And the more you do this, the more your life changes quietly. You stop fearing the beginning. You stop worshiping readiness. You start trusting movement. And once you've built momentum, motivation becomes a byproduct. Not a requirement. A simple promise for 2026. In 2026, act first. Feel later. That doesn't mean ignore your emotions. It means don't let them drive. Feelings are real, but they're not always accurate. They don't always reflect your potential. Sometimes your feelings are just your brain trying to protect you from discomfort. And growth requires discomfort. So you act anyway. You act tired. You act unsure. You act imperfectly. And you let the feeling catch up. Because it will. Closing. The biggest mindset lie is still this. I'll start when I feel ready. You won't. But here's the good news. You don't need to be ready. You just need to begin. Action creates motivation, not the other way around. So do the work tired. Do it unsure. Do it imperfectly. In 2026, act first. Feel later. That's how momentum is built. Let the day teach you. Most people end their day the same way. The lights are low. The room is quiet except for the soft glow of a screen. The day is officially over, but the mind hasn't caught up yet. Fingers scroll without thinking. One video turns into another. One post becomes 10. Time passes unnoticed. It feels like rest, but it isn't. It's distraction. It's escape. It's a way to avoid sitting alone with your own thoughts. After a long day, this feels earned. You tell yourself you deserve it. You worked hard. You survived meetings, responsibilities, stress, expectations. Your brain wants relief, not reflection. So you scroll. You scroll to forget what didn't go well. You scroll to quiet the small voice that asks uncomfortable questions. You scroll until your eyes feel heavy and your mind feels numb. And then you sleep. The next morning comes quickly. Another day begins. And the previous one disappears without teaching you anything. Not because it had nothing to teach, but because you never asked. At some point, maybe late at night when the scrolling stops working the way it used to, you start to notice something. Even after hours of distraction, your mind still feels full. Not in a good way. Just crowded. Unsettled. You put the phone down and stare at the ceiling. And a thought appears. Simple, quiet, but honest. What if I ended my day differently? Not productively. Not perfectly. Just intentionally. Instead of escaping the day, what if you faced it gently? Instead of drowning it out with noise, what if you listened to it? That's when the idea of reflection shows up. Not the heavy, serious kind. Not a long journal entry. Not a list of failures. Just 2 questions. That's all. The first one feels easier. What did I do well today? At first, your mind resists. It wants to say nothing special. It wants to downplay your effort. You're used to focusing on what went wrong, not what went right. But you sit with the question. Maybe you didn't do everything you planned, but you did something. Maybe you showed up when you wanted to quit. Maybe you stayed calm in a moment where you usually wouldn't. Maybe you completed a small task you've been avoiding. Maybe you were patient. Maybe you were honest. Maybe you tried. These things count, even if no one else saw them. You realize how rarely you give yourself credit. How quickly you move past effort as if it doesn't matter unless it leads to perfection. How harsh your inner voice has become over time. So tonight you acknowledge something good. Not to inflate your ego. Not to pretend the day was perfect. Just to be fair. And something softens inside you. The second question comes next. What can I improve tomorrow? This one feels dangerous at first. You're used to turning this question into a weapon against yourself. You've asked it before, but with judgment. With shame. With that familiar tone of, why are you like this? This time you try something different. No judgment. No shame. You don't say I failed. You say I learned. Maybe tomorrow you could start earlier. Maybe you could pause before reacting. Maybe you could protect your time a little better. Maybe you could rest instead of pushing through exhaustion. Improvement doesn't mean criticism. It means awareness. And awareness feels lighter than self-attack. You realize something important in that moment. Reflection isn't about replaying the day to punish yourself. It's about understanding it, so you don't repeat the same patterns on autopilot. Mistakes stop feeling personal when you view them as information. They become lessons instead of labels. You're not bad at this. You're just still learning. You're not behind. You're just on a path. And slowly something begins to change in how you end your days. Instead of collapsing into distraction, you pause. Sometimes it's just 2 quiet minutes. Sometimes it's lying in bed, eyes closed, thinking through the day like a gentle recap, not a trial. You notice patterns. You notice when your energy dips. When certain situations trigger stress. When you perform better than you expected. When you shrink. When you grow. You start connecting dots. And with each night of reflection, confidence builds. Not loud confidence, not arrogant confidence, but the quiet kind. The kind that comes from understanding yourself. The kind that says, I know what I'm doing better than I did yesterday. Effort starts to feel meaningful again. Even when results aren't immediate, you can see progress in how you think, how you respond, how you try again. Reflection turns effort into evidence. Evidence that you're showing up. Evidence that you're paying attention. Evidence that you care. And caring is powerful. Days stop blurring together. Each one begins to stand on its own, carrying a small lesson forward. You don't need dramatic breakthroughs. You just need consistency. One honest look per day. One small adjustment at a time. You realize that growth doesn't happen in big moments. It happens quietly at night when you choose to learn instead of escape. Most people end their day scrolling. You choose something else. You choose to ask 2 questions. And in doing so, you turn time into a teacher instead of something to kill. In 2026, let every day teach you something. Not everything. Just one thing. That's enough. Because a year of small lessons adds up to a life that actually moves forward. Not perfectly, but consciously. And that changes everything. You don't need to become someone else. There was a quiet pressure you carried for a long time. Not the loud kind. Not the kind that makes you panic. The slow kind. The kind that whispers, you should be further by now. The kind that makes you feel behind even when you're trying. The kind that convinces you that change only counts if it's dramatic. You looked at your life and thought in extremes. If I'm going to start, I have to do everything. If I'm not all in, what's the point? If I fail once, I've failed completely. So you waited. You waited for the perfect moment. The perfect plan. The perfect version of yourself to show up. And while you waited, days passed. The myth of overnight change. You'd seen the stories. Someone wakes up and decides to change their life. Someone flips a switch and becomes disciplined. Someone reinvents themselves in one bold move. Those stories made change feel urgent and impossible at the same time. Because when you tried to copy them, it never lasted. You'd go all in for a few days. Maybe a week. You'd push hard. Wake up early. Do everything right. And then life would happen. You miss a day. Feel tired. Lose momentum. And the disappointment felt heavier than the effort ever did. So you stopped again. Not because you didn't care, but because extremes burned you out. Showing up when motivation is gone. What you didn't realize back then was this. Change doesn't come from intensity. It comes from return. From showing up again. After missing a day. After losing motivation. After feeling like you failed. You don't need to transform your life overnight. You need to show up. Again. And again. And again. Even when it feels boring. Even when it feels pointless. Even when no one notices. Especially then. The smallest version of progress. One day something shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically. You stopped asking, how do I change everything? And started asking, what can I repeat? Not improve. Not perfect. Repeat. A 5-minute habit. 1 page read. A short walk. Writing 1 sentence. It felt almost too small to matter. But you did it anyway. Not with excitement. With quiet acceptance. And the next day you did it again. How consistency changes the brain. You didn't feel different right away. There was no rush. No sudden confidence. But something invisible was happening. Your brain was learning trust. Each small habit repeated sent a message. I show up for myself. I don't disappear when it gets boring. I don't need extremes to move forward. Consistency began rewiring your brain. Not through force but through familiarity. The habit stopped feeling heavy. The resistance softened. The decision-making got easier. Not because life got easier, but because you did. The burnout you finally understood. Looking back, you realized how often you burned yourself out trying to do it right. You mistook suffering for discipline. You mistook exhaustion for progress. But extremes don't build strong minds. They overwhelm them. Your brain isn't designed to sprint forever. It's designed to adapt, slowly, steadily. Small habits repeated daily don't shock your system. They settle into it. They become normal. And normal is powerful. The quiet confidence of repetition. Over time, something unexpected happened. You stopped negotiating with yourself so much. The habit didn't feel like a decision anymore. It felt like part of the day, like brushing your teeth, like making coffee. That quiet consistency built a different kind of confidence. Not loud, not showy, reliable. You trusted yourself more. Not because you were perfect, but because you kept returning. Missing days without quitting. Some days you still missed. Life didn't suddenly become smooth. You got tired, distracted, overwhelmed. But this time, missing a day didn't turn into quitting. There was no spiral, no shame. You just showed up again. That alone changed everything. Because mindset doesn't change when you never fail. It changes when failure doesn't stop you. The long view. Weeks passed, then months. The habits were still small, but their impact wasn't. Your thinking became steadier. Your emotions less reactive. Your sense of direction clearer. Not because you transformed your life overnight, but because you stopped abandoning yourself. Small habits, repeated daily, over time. That's how mindsets change. How lives actually change. Life didn't flip upside down. It slowly turned in a new direction. And one day you noticed something surprising. You weren't chasing change anymore. You were living it. Quietly. Consistently. One small action at a time. That's how lives change. Not in explosions, but in echoes. Actions repeated until they become identity. Where you stand now. You don't feel rushed anymore. You don't feel behind. You know something now that you didn't before. You don't need to become someone new. You just need to keep showing up. As who you already are. Again. And again. And again. And that. Slow, steady human consistency is more powerful than any overnight transformation ever could be. 2026 doesn't need a new version of you. It needs a consistent one. You don't need more pressure. You need direction. You don't need perfection. You need commitment. If you apply these habits, not all, just a few, your mindset will reset. Your confidence will grow. And your future will quietly begin to shift. The question is not, will 2026 be different? The question is, will you be?